The sun hung low in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the charred remains of what once was a home. The air was thick with the acrid scent of burnt wood, a solemn reminder of the devastation that had swept through these lands just days before. At the center of this destruction stood a lone figure, hands on her hips, a silhouette against the backdrop of loss. Grace, a rancher for most of her life, stood rooted to the ground, staring into the ashes. Her heart raced, pulse pounding in her ears. This wasn't just a house, it was her sanctuary, her dreams, her family's legacy. The fierce winds had carried flames through the valley like a hunter on the prowl, and now all that remained was ash and memory. She had fought so hard to build a life here, and it felt like the universe had conspired to wipe it all away in moments. Grace took a deep breath, filling her lungs with the smoky air. Every inhalation churned up memories of laughter and warmth. Her children, grown now, used to race through the yard, their laughter ringing like music. Her husband, once so proud of their home, would sit on the porch, an easy smile on his face, watching the sun dip below the horizon. But now that joy lay buried beneath the debris. She crouched down, intent on finding something, anything, that wasn't reduced to nothing. The heat of the flames had turned wood to charcoal, glass to fragments, but deep down, she felt a flicker of hope. Something told her there was a story still waiting to be uncovered, even in this charred graveyard. With bare hands, she began to sift through the ashes, feeling the gritty powder between her fingers. Every small handful stirred a cocktail of sorrow and nostalgia. A broken photo frame here, a charred corner of a children's book there. But what caught her eye was something gleaming faintly beneath the ashes. With cautious anticipation, she brushed aside the blackened remnants, revealing a shiny object, partially hidden but determined to be seen. Unearthing it, she held it up, a small silver locket, tarnished but unmistakably hers. Heart pounding, she flicked it open. Inside were two tiny pictures. One of her son, barely 6, his freckled face lighting up with a toothy grin. The other of her daughter at a school recital, beaming with pride as she held up a handmade trophy. Tears stung Grace's eyes. It was a subtle reminder of everything that mattered, everything worth fighting for. In that moment, she was hit by a wave of emotion, an intensity that sank deep into her bones. This locket was a symbol, a promise that even amidst the ashes, the essence of her family remained. And if she had this, what else could she find? "Keep digging," she whispered to herself, a mantra to push through the overwhelming grief. The sun continued its descent, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, each moment feeling heavier than the last. With renewed determination, she delved deeper into the soot. Piece by piece, she began to reveal more clothing buttons, a rusted belt buckle, a dusty collection of marbles, each artifact stirring stories she thought were lost forever. The digging felt like a battle against time. She wasn't just searching for physical pieces. She was seeking to piece together the fragments of her life. Each find was like a puzzle piece that whispered secrets of joy and laughter. Suddenly, her phone rang, breaking the silence of her solitary endeavor. It was her daughter, Tara. She asked, her voice quaking. Grace could hear the weight of concern laced in her words. "I found something," Grace said, swallowing the emotions that threatened to rise. She held the locket close to her heart, feeling its warmth seep into her skin. "I found the locket, Tara." There was a brief pause, a reflective silence that spoke volumes. "That's good, Mom," Tara finally said. But there it was, the question that hung in the air like smoke. What were they going to do? The harsh reality was that the fire had left them with little more than the clothes on their backs, their family history reduced to memories swirling in the ashes. "We rebuild," Grace said, her voice laced with fierce resolve that surprised even her. "We find a way to start again." Even as she said the words, uncertainty danced in her mind. How to recover from this? Where would they live? How would they pick up the pieces? But in the depths of her soul, a flicker of something else ignited, a wild hope. They had each other after all, and they had these memories. "Mom," Tara's voice returned, more steady now, "I'll come help." As night began to blanket the sky, Grace hung up, feeling a surge of comfort. She wasn't alone. They were a family forged in resilience. The weight of loss still pressed on her heart, but it felt a little lighter now. With renewed vigor, Grace plunged her hands back into the ashes. As she unearthed more objects, she recalled the history each item held. The marbles had been played with on long summer days. The buttons had adorned the outfits worn at the county fair. Every piece told a story, much like her life, a patchwork of moments both joyous and heart-wrenching. As darkness enveloped the landscape, shadows stretched long beneath the moonlight, leaving the devastation just a little bit surreal. But she pressed on. It wasn't about the stuff. It was about the lives they had led and the legacy they would continue to build. The ash beneath her nails was a testament to the hard work ahead, a ritual of rebirth. Hours passed as she worked, sweat mingling with ash, but her heart felt lighter, punctuated by that spark of determination. She thought back to her husband, long gone but not forgot, how he would have taken charge in this moment. "We face the storms of life, Grace," he'd said during their toughest times. The chilling wind whipped against her, reminding her of the inevitability of change. Control was merely an illusion, one she had clung to for far too long. But there was something beautifully chaotic about rebuilding, about reclaiming the space that had burned away. As she stood, brushing off the last of the remnants, the moonlight illuminated her path. It cast a silvery glow on the familiar horizon, the hills, the pastures, the towering trees that had witnessed her life unfold. They were the witnesses to her fears, but also to her triumphs. This land, though scorched, was still hers. The next few weeks blurred together in a whirlwind of toil and community. Friends and neighbors rallied around her, showing up with tools, food, and most importantly, warmth. Together, they cleared away the remnants of her old life, piecing together not only what had been lost, but what could emerge anew. They built a foundation of resilience as much as they laid bricks for a new home. In community, she found strength, and in that strength, she discovered hope. Tara would come by every weekend, bringing her kids, and together they created new memories, laughter echoing amidst the construction. They painted walls, set up a small garden, and shared stories of love and loss under the stars. One night, sitting around a small fire, Grace pulled out the locket again, its surface now polished, reflecting the warmth of the flames. The children huddled close, eyes wide as she recounted the stories behind the pictures contained within. In their shared memories, she felt the weight of absence lift slightly. They were not just growing a house, they were weaving together the fabric of their family once more. Months passed and the seasons shifted, each bringing with it a breath of change. The new home took shape, sturdy and warm, yet it felt different. This wasn't merely a replacement. This was a testament to survival, a celebration of what lay ahead. Grace found herself smiling more often, laughter spilling easily from her lips, holding on to the words of her husband like a guiding star. And as spring rolled into summer, life blossomed anew around them. The ranchland began to flourish, reminding Grace that even after fire, life refuses to be silenced. She watched her children chase after each other, much as they had done years ago, the echoes of joy once more filling the air. One starry night, alone under that vastness, Grace pondered the journey she had taken from ashes to hope. Those dark days had forged her into something stronger, a phoenix rising, not from mere survival but from rebirth. It wasn't easy, but nothing had ever prepared her for the resilience she had unearthed within herself. She understood now that life, like nature, was an endless cycle of renewal. In every loss there lay the seeds of new beginnings. And so, with her heart full and her gaze fixed firmly on the horizon, she knew one thing for certain: her story was far from over. It was only just beginning. The sun dipped low, washing the world in fiery hues. As the last rays broke through the smoky haze, a silhouette struggled against the backdrop of ash and ruin. Grace, a rancher who had poured her heart into this land, looked out at the remains of her life. Just days ago, it had all been vibrant and full of life. Now, all that stood in the place of her home was a graveyard of blackened wood and charred memories. She could still hear the echo of laughter that once filled the open spaces, her kids running wild under the wide, blue sky. But now that joy was snuffed out, overtaken by an unsettling silence. Tears formed in her eyes, but she blinked them away. Today wasn't a day for despair. It was a day for resolve. She knelt, hands sinking into the gritty earth, feeling the heat still radiating like a deep, haunting memory. As a rancher, Grace had seen storms before, literal ones that threatened her herd and metaphorical ones that tested her spirit. But nothing prepared her for the roaring inferno that had taken everything. It was like a betrayal, nature turning against her, stealing away years of hard work and love. But as haunting as this moment was, she felt a spark within her, an instinct to dig, to uncover something beneath all this ash. So she began to sift through the ruins. In her mind, she calculated what a normal day would have looked like. Morning coffee in her favorite mug, the children rushing in for breakfast, the milk from her cows cooling in the barn. But now the barn stood silent, the fields empty. A heavy lump formed in her throat as she reached down, sweeping her fingers through the soot-streaked ground. The world around her was quiet except for the whisper of the wind, rustling debris. Grace felt something hard, something solid beckoning from the depths. She pulled away blackened bits of wood and shattered glass, revealing a small metal object. Heart racing, she lifted it with care and gasped to lock it, distorted but still clinging to its shape. Memories surged. She recognized it immediately as a gift from her late husband, a token of love on their anniversary. Hands trembling, she flicked it open. Inside were two pictures, one of her son, Jack, with his goofy grin, the other of her daughter, Maria, dressed for a dance recital. A rush of emotions enveloped her. Tears finally slipped down her cheeks. These photographs, so fragile and small, represented everything she had fought for. In that moment, staring at those two faces frozen in time, she understood. She wasn't just digging through ashes, she was digging for hope. A voice pierced the silence, sharp and unexpected. It was Tamar, her best friend and neighbor. Tamar rushed toward her, breathless and wide-eyed. "I saw the smoke." Grace wiped her eyes, trying to put on a brave face. It's a mess," she managed to say, her voice trembling. The weight of the situation hung thick between them. "I know it's bad," Tamar said, kneeling beside her, their hands digging into the ruins. "But you're not alone." Together they began unearthing small treasures, old coins, a tattered teddy bear, remnants of children's toys long forgotten. With each object, their laughter replaced the heaviness. It became a game, a way to reclaim the joy that fire had stolen. They began spinning stories, like how Jack had once insisted on bringing a puppy home, despite Grace's apprehensions. The puppy chewed through every shoe in the house before finally settling down beside the kids. As they dug deeper, her heart began to mend piece by piece with every found memory. Those ashes no longer felt like a grave. They felt like an opportunity, a canvas to start anew. But even as she smiled and shared stories, in the back of her mind lurked the questions that wouldn't leave. How would she rebuild? Where would the money come from? Time slipped away, the sun shifting from golden to a deep indigo. The fire's destruction felt less daunting, guided by her strong spirit and Tamar's unwavering support. The world around them was shifting. What had once felt so final started to feel like the birth of something new. Days turned into weeks as the community rallied around Grace. Neighbors she barely knew showed up with tools, food, and arms wide open. They cleared debris, raised money, and offered comforting words. Life, even after loss, found a way to carry on. And nestled within that grief was a growing desire to rebuild, to create a new chapter in their story. Grace poured herself into every task, her spirit ignited. She held meetings, mapped out plans, and envisioned what her new home would look like. With the help of Tamar and their friends, the ranch began to reemerge. But with every nail hammered and every beam raised, there was a sting, each echoing blow, a reminder of what had slipped through her grasp. But loss spoke to resilience. She began to realize that even ash can be fertile ground for new beginnings. As she sorted through the remaining ruins of her old life, Grace found herself documenting her journey. With her phone, she captured each moment, every new step, and every fight against despair. Counseling those found photographs became a healing process, a way to honor what had been lost. One night, while going through some saved images on her phone, she stumbled upon a video from a family fishing trip, her husband's laughter filling the air. She felt a pang of longing, the ache of absence settling deep. It was hard to imagine a future without him there. But through the blurriness of grief, she began to see a vision. The ranch could reflect the love she still felt, with a new garden blooming in his memory where their old swing set used to sway. Maybe it could hold classes for children fostering life instead of loss. Perhaps they could plan an orchard, one that welcomed laughter just like the old home had. Days passed and the new home began to take shape. The walls stood tall, studded with windows that trapped the golden light. Grace would sit on the porch, sipping her coffee, gazing at the horizon, and picture those visions coming to life. Each moment spent watching the landscape unfold grounded her in purpose. The weeds that grew in the yard didn't seem so bothersome anymore. They felt like life itself was pushing through the cracks. And then one fateful day, a windstorm swept through the valley. It roared outside, shaking the walls of her still unfinished home. Grace huddled inside, fear weaving through her as she listened to the howling winds. It felt like a reminder that life was unpredictable, terrifying, but full of potential. She had just started to let go of the past and step into the future. Would she be cast back again into the dark? With her heart racing, Grace reminded herself of what she had overcome. She stepped outside to face the storm, the wind biting at her skin. The ranch stood proud against nature's fury. There was something powerful about that moment, about facing down the forces that sought to pull her back. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the storm passed. The sky cleared, leaving a haunting beauty in the aftermath. A crisp rainbow glimmered against the horizon. Grace knew that in that moment she wasn't just a survivor, she was a warrior reclaiming her narrative. Back inside, laughter filled the unfinished walls. Friends dropped by, bringing along their kids. Together, they settled into the space, filling it with sound and joy. It no longer felt empty. As they shared meals and stories, the ranch was coming alive again. Months turned into a year. The ranch was breathtaking, flower beds blooming with color, chickens clucking in the yard, the steady lowing of cows in their pen. Grace stood at the edge of her land, surveying everything she had built. It was a patchwork home filled with life, laughter, and resilience. In the twilight, Grace looked up at the stars, brimming with gratitude. She could almost hear her husband's voice, whispering encouragement like a gentle breeze. Nothing would ever completely fill the void he left, but in finding her strength, she discovered a deeper connection to him. And within those ashes rose a new legacy built not just in bricks and wood, but in love and unyielding spirit. Each year, on the anniversary of the fire, Grace would hold a gathering. Neighbors and friends would come together to celebrate resilience, share food, and tell stories of everything they'd overcome. The ranch transformed from a site of loss into a sanctuary of hope. Children played under the sun, laughter echoing through the fields as Grace looked on, her heart swelling with pride. So as dusk fell on another day, she took a moment to breathe it all in. The ranch was no longer just a place. It had become a living tribute, a reminder that even amidst the ashes, life finds a way to rise again. The flames had danced like wild spirits under the dark sky, devouring everything in their path. It was the loud crackle of wood giving way that had jolted Grace from sleep, a frantic fire alarm ringing in her ears like a death knell. Heart pounding, she had rushed through choking smoke and racing chaos, gathering her children while the inferno raged mercilessly outside. Now standing amid the charred remains of her life, she felt small in the vast emptiness that once cradled her home. The sun peeked through the smoke, illuminating the ash-covered ground, revealing a broken world that seemed almost surreal. For days after the fire, grief had weighed heavy on her heart, pulling her down like quicksand. How could something so vital, so full of warmth and life, be reduced to mere blackened ruins? But today was different. Today, fueled by a fierce determination, Grace stood anchored, hands clenched into fists at her sides. She felt an urge to dig, to sift through the ashes, to uncover whatever remnants might still hold meaning. With a deep breath, she knelt down, feeling the coarse grit shift beneath her fingertips. Each scoop of ash felt like a small battle between loss and hope. The air around her was thick with the scent of charred wood and memories. She could almost hear the laughter of her children, echoes of long summer days spent building forts and racing each other through the fields. Those sounds flooded her mind like a symphony, only serving to deepen her sorrow. But amid that overwhelming sadness, a tiny flicker of resilience stirred within her. She started digging with urgency, the world around her shrinking to this one task. Each handful of ash she pulled away was both cathartic and painful. A cracked piece of ceramic here, remnants of a family dinner, a part of her life unearthed from the depths. A small, rusted bell that once hung on the door, a silent witness to countless joyful arrivals. But deeper in the ashes, she felt the promise of something more. Just then, her hand struck something solid. Heart racing, she brushed away the ash with trembling fingers. Revealed was a small metal object, its edges dinged and scratched but unmistakably familiar. It was her late husband's watch, the one he had worn every day before the illness had taken him from her. It whispered to her of love and a life shared now lost like everything else. Tears blurred her vision as she cradled it close, memories flashing through her mind like a film reel. She could hear him teasing her from so long ago. But it was more than that. It was a token of their life together, a life filled with hopes and dreams, laughter and love. And now, as the last remnants of that life lay beneath a shroud of ash, Grace felt a swell of purpose rising within her. This wasn't just about the loss, it was about reclaiming her future. Each item she found seemed to whisper encouragement, guiding her to remember not just what she lost, but what she could still build. The digging became almost meditative, rhythmically blending sorrow and hope. Time slipped by as she recovered childhood trinkets, bits of colored glass, even a half-burnt family photo. The smiles captured forever despite the destruction surrounding her. Each object told its story, a memory woven into the fabric of their lives. Hours passed, and the sun hung low in the sky, casting shadows that seemed to stretch long and unsettling across the ruins. Just as she thought she might stop, Grace struck something harder than ash, a small box, blackened but intact. With her heart racing, she pulled it from the debris, careful not to let the twisting emotions inside her spill over. Setting the box down, she hesitated. What if it was empty? What if it held another reminder of loss? But instinct pushed her forward. With trembling fingers, she pried it open. Inside were letters tied together with a faded ribbon, a treasure trove of sentiments from her husband during their early years together. As she gingerly pulled one out, a wave of warmth washed over her, flooding her heart with memory. "Dear Grace," it began, the ink slightly smudged but the sentiment clear. "Every day with you feels like an adventure, and the love we share lights up my world." Tears fell freely now as she read through his words, each sentence a declaration of love, a reminder of the life they had forged together. It reminded her of the strength she always admired in him, the way he confronted challenges head-on. Reading his promises filled her with a warmth that chased away the chill of despair. "Even if I'm not here, my love for you will remain," one letter concluded, and in that moment it felt like he was there beside her as she dug through the ashes. The very fear of forgetting him began to fade, replaced by a comforting realization. She wouldn't lose him. He lived on in her heart, in the memories that these letters provided. With her heart full, Grace stood to survey what she'd unearthed. While the remnants of her physical life lay in ashes, something more profound had emerged from the depths, an unyielding spirit, a reminder that she had the strength to rise just like the phoenix from the flames. Just then she heard footsteps behind her. Turning, she found Tamar, her best friend and neighbor, making her way across the burnt earth. Hands on her hips, Tamar looked heartbroken yet fierce, the grief mirrored in her eyes. "I couldn't sit by and do nothing," Tamar said, her voice steady. Grace felt a gratitude overwhelming her. "I've found so much," she whispered, emotions spilling over, "but I still don't know how to rebuild." Tamar knelt next to her, eyes filled with understanding. "One day at a time. We can do this together, Grace." With Tamar by her side, they began to gather the remnants, each object telling a tale. They took a moment to honor what was lost, but also to celebrate what was still in front of them, a future they could paint together. As they cleared the land, the two women began sketching a plan. They discussed the layout of a new home, strong and welcoming, a place filled with laughter and love. And as the sunlight poured over them, an unexpected sense of possibilities began to sprout amidst the ashes. Weeks passed, and the community rallied around them, bringing supplies and labor, hearts filled with compassion. Grace quickly transformed from a grieving widow to a leader, guiding efforts to rebuild her sanctuary. They faced setback storms that tore down structures, financial strain that weighed heavy. But each time, Grace found inspiration in the strength of her neighbors, in the letters from her husband, in the love surrounding her. The framework of the new ranch began rising, sheet metal and wood standing tall against the sky. Each beam reminded her of her husband's watch, of the moments tucked away in those letters. She imbued every piece of the new home with the stories of her past, merging it with the promise of a new future. As she worked, she began to notice something shifting within her. What had once felt like devastation started to feel alive. She fostered connections, igniting new friendships that turned this rebuilding process into a celebration rather than a chore. Together they poured their energies into this joint endeavor, laughter blending with hard work, the sound of renewal. And so, it was no longer just about the grief she held, but about the life still waiting to unfold. Each day brought fresh challenges but also new experiences. She found herself dancing to old songs under the stars with friends, laughing with her children around the dinner table, and realizing slowly but surely that joy could coexist with sorrow. Then one afternoon, while the floor of the new kitchen was set in place, her children rushed in with excitement. "Mom!" Jack exclaimed, his eyes shining with mischief. Following them outside, Grace watched in bewilderment as they unveiled their latest creation. A small garden filled with colorful flowers, each planted carefully, bright and hopeful against the stark landscape. "We thought our old home needed some color, and we wanted it to feel alive again," Maria beamed. Eyeing the garden, Grace felt the waterworks threaten to overflow once more. She exclaimed. They stood side by side, admiring their handiwork, surrounded by hope and warmth birthed from the very ashes of despair. The new home rose with every day, each beam and nail not just a reconstruction, but a testament to resilience. It held within it laughter, new dreams, and the legacy of love that would never fade. For Grace, it was a reminder that she was not defined by her loss, but by what she chose to build from it. As the sun set over the hills one evening, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Grace stood on the porch of her new home, a sense of peace settling over her. They had weathered storms, unearthed treasures from the ashes, and transformed their grief into strength. Her heart swelled with gratitude as she gazed out over what she had built. This ranch was no longer just the remnants of what had been. It was a vibrant new beginning. And as she inhaled the sweet scent of life returning, Grace couldn't help but smile. She had rediscovered her roots, not buried in sorrow but blossoming in joy. From the ashes of despair, she had risen, and in that moment, surrounded by the love of her children, her friends, and the memories of the past, she felt unstoppable. The journey ahead was brave and uncertain, but she embraced it with open arms because she now understood a powerful truth. Even in the darkest of nights, hope would always find a way to shine through. The orange flames twisted and writhed like a living creature, devouring everything in their path. Grace stood frozen, watching in horror as her home was consumed by the inferno. The sounds were deafening, the crackling wood, the roar of the fire swallowing memories whole. Just hours ago, laughter had filled the rooms. Now it was all reduced to ash. She remembered the warmth and joy of family dinners, her children racing up and down the hall, their spirits bursting just like the bright colors of the decorations she had always cherished. But now all that remained was this hellish landscape of soot and smoking ruins. Each breath felt heavy, filled with the acrid scent of what had once been. As if waking from a nightmare, Grace shook herself, heart pounding. There was still work to do. Amid the horror, she felt the need to dig to uncover what lay beneath the ashes. Loss surged through her, a tidal wave, but within that wave was a flicker of determination. She knelt down, hands trembling but resolute, ready to search through the remnants of her life. The ground was hot and gritty under her palms. With each handful of ash, she unearthed fragments of her past, pieces of her world. The initial shock began to fade, and in its place emerged a sense of purpose. Every scoop was a step toward reclaiming that warmth, that joy. As she dug deeper, she struck something solid. Her heart raced as she brushed away the layers of soot, revealing a small metal object, its edges bent but still intact. She picked it up, a locket, silver and engraved. It belonged to her, a cherished gift from her husband on their anniversary. She could almost hear him whispering sweet words into her ear as he presented it to her. With shaking fingers, Grace opened the locket. Inside were two pictures, one of her son, Jack, wearing a mischievous grin, and the other of her daughter, Maria, dressed up for her first dance recital. Tears spilled over her cheeks, hot and fierce. Those smiling faces took her back to better days, moments full of laughter, warmth, and love. They felt so close, yet painfully far away. But within that grief rose something else, a fierce resolve. "I will not be defined by this destruction," she murmured to herself. The sun climbed higher in the sky, and the weight of her loss mixed with newfound strength. She began to imagine the days ahead with a clarity she hadn't felt since the fire. What would her ranch become once again? Would it still be a sanctuary of joy for her children? With renewed determination, Grace dug on, spurred by the hope that flickered within her. She moved aside the debris, unearthing bits of furniture, charred books, each piece a chapter in her life turned to ash. A photo of her husband, young and laughing, caught her eye, and she grasped it tightly, the shadow of despair transforming into a sense of gratitude for having known such love. Hours passed, and the sun began its descent. Shadows grew long across the field as the temperature dropped. Grace paused to catch her breath, sweat mingling with tears when she heard footsteps approaching. She called, recognizing the familiar voice. Her best friend rushed over, concern etched on her face. "I saw the smoke, I had to come." Grace took a deep breath, overwhelmed by the vulnerability of the moment. "It's harder than I thought, but I'm finding things." She held up the locket, the reflection shimmering in the dying light. Tamar's gaze softened. "It's beautiful, and it's a sign, Grace." With a sudden wave of courage, Grace turned back to the rubble. "I'm not just digging through ashes," she said, urgency coursing through her. Together, they began to sift through the wreckage, uncovering trinkets, mementos, the very essence of what made their ranch a home. Tamar's presence was a balm, comforting and supportive. Each item they uncovered told stories that whispered of life, the good, the bad, and everything in between. As they dug, the sky shifted hues, the orange and purple colors melding into a canvas of dusk. Grace felt the transition not only in the world around her but deep within her heart. With each layer of ash they removed, she uncovered hope, possibility, and resilience. "That might be a good spot for a garden," Tamar suggested, pointing to an open area. Grace nodded, imagining bright flowers blooming, their fragrance mixing with the smell of fresh earth. "And we could plant a tree in memory of." The thought struck her like a bolt of lightning. This place could hold their grief, yet also cradle new life. It would be a sanctuary, a reminder that even in the depths of despair, beauty could emerge. "Exactly," Tamar affirmed, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. "We'll create a space that reflects both the past and the future." As the last light faded from the sky, they made their way back to what remained of the house. Together, they formed a bond stronger than ever, grounded in grief but infused with hope. Days turned into weeks, and whispers of the fire spread through the community. Friends, neighbors, even strangers showed up with tools, supplies, and unwavering support. The ranch became a hub of activity filled with laughter and shared stories. With each plank laid and wall constructed, Grace felt her spirits lift. The bones of her new home rose from those dark ashes like a phoenix. They painted its walls bright, filled the spaces with games and laughter, and slowly turned a site of loss into a cornerstone of hope. Yet, even amid the busy hands and friendly faces, moments of grief would wash over her unexpectedly. Late at night, she found herself wandering through the empty spaces, memories flooding back. The shadows of absence hung heavy in the air, reminding her of all that had been lost. She would stumble upon photographs or find an echo of laughter where the children once played. In those moments, a longing would grip her heart, a bittersweet ache that lingered like a ghost. But as the days turned into months, Grace learned to embrace the pain alongside the joy. The two were intertwined like threads woven into the tapestry of life. One sunny afternoon, while repainting the front porch with the kids, Grace felt the warmth of the sun on her back, a comforting embrace. Jack and Maria giggled as they splattered paint on each other, their laughter ringing out like music. "Mom!" Maria shouted, brandishing a brush covered in bright colors. Jack joined in, his infectious energy filling the air, igniting something within Grace. In that moment of joy, surrounded by laughter and play, she realized the fragments of her past were still with her, alive in the laughter, in the paintings on the walls, in the very ground she had claimed. Each joyful note was a memory interwoven with the pain, merging into something beautifully complex. Weeks later, when the last nail had been hammered in, Grace invited the community to a celebration, a gathering of gratitude and resilience. The ranch was no longer a shell of what once was. It was a living testament to the human spirit, thriving despite tragedy. Families arrived with food and laughter, filling the spaces with warmth. Children raced from room to room as the adults shared memories and stories. For Grace, it felt like an exhale, a release of everything she had held in since the fire. Amid the celebration, she took a moment to step outside. The night sky spread vast above, twinkling stars flickering like the dreams she still cherished. As she stood there, she felt an overwhelming sense of peace envelop her. This was home, rebuilt from the ashes of loss, yet filled with the vibrant colors of love, community, and hope. And then she noticed something stirring in the garden they had planted together. Bright flowers were blooming, an explosion of color against the darkness that once covered the land. Grace felt her heart swell. This was their symbol, their reminder that life goes on. With the warmth of connection wrapping around her, she turned her gaze back toward the laughter and joy spilling out of her home. Her heart sang with gratitude for each person who had stood by her side. She had unearthed so much more than just objects from the ashes. She had dug deep into the spirit of resilience. Life would continue to bring challenges, storms might still come, but for Grace, every moment was a step toward healing, a testament to the beauty that can arise from heartbreak. She would carry the memories of her past not as burdens but as guiding stars illuminating her path ahead. Looking around at her children, at the garden, at the community that had come together, she knew that, while fire had taken so much, it also had a strange way of opening eyes to what truly mattered. She would forge ahead, forever guided by love, laughter, and the echoes of those she had lost. This was not an end, it was a new beginning. From the ashes, Grace had risen. She had found not only remnants of her past, but also love, laughter, and the unyielding spirit to chase after a future filled with hope. And as she stood there, surrounded by the very fabric of life and resilience, she knew one thing for sure. The heart may break, but it also learns how to heal, how to bloom anew. The crackling flames roared like a wild beast, devouring everything in their greedy path. Grace stood frozen, a primal fear gripping her as she watched her home succumb to the inferno. Just hours ago, the laughter of her children had filled the air, the warm glow of family dinners painted across the walls. Now, the once vibrant sanctuary had turned into a hellscape of smoke and embers. Grace's heart raced, memories swirling in her mind like smoke. The kitchen where she had made countless meals, the living room where they'd gathered for movie nights, all of it fading away, reduced to a shadow of its former self. She could hardly believe the destruction before her. How could everything that mattered vanish in a matter of minutes? But as she stood there, grief morphing into something fierce, a deep instinct broke through the haze she had to dig. Amid the chaos, her heart beat like a drum, urging her to search for remnants of what had once been. Kneeling on the scorched earth, she thrust her hands into the soot, feeling the coarse granules slip through her fingers. Each handful was a reminder of what she had lost, but also an opportunity to find something that could help her start anew. The air was pungent, heavy with the smell of charred wood and memories. She recalled conversations with her late husband, how they had dreamed about raising their family on this land. As she dug, something caught her eye, a glimmer beneath the ash. Heart pounding, she brushed aside the debris, revealing a small, twisted piece of metal. It was a locket, one her husband had given her on their anniversary. Gripping it tightly, she opened it. Inside were tiny pictures of her two children, Jack with his goofy smile and Maria glowing in her recital dress. Tears blurred her vision, but they were no longer just tears of loss, they were tears of resilience. "This isn't the end," Grace whispered to the empty land. With every piece of her past unearthed, she began to feel the weight of despair light. The ashes held not only sorrow but fragments of her life, symbols of her love and laughter. A weathered teddy bear, a cracked coffee mug, and a broken photo frame came to light. Each new find felt like a small victory, weaving together the tapestry of her family's story. Hours passed, but Grace didn't stop. She was driven by a wildfire of determination that burned brighter than the flames that had destroyed her home. She felt as if each artifact spoke to her, urging her to keep going, to fight for a future that was still possible. Then her hands hit something solid, something she almost didn't want to uncover. It was a small box, charred but intact. Heart racing, she carefully pulled it from the ashes and opened it. Inside were letters, each one tied with a bit of frayed ribbon. They were love letters from her husband, written during their early years together. "Grace, every moment spent with you is a treasure," she read aloud, her voice trembling. As the words settled deep within her, warmth began to spread through her heart. Those letters held his love more alive now than ever. It was as if he was there, whispering encouragement. "This is not over," she could almost hear him say. Suddenly, she felt a presence beside her, a familiar figure emerging through the haze. It was Tamar, her best friend, running toward her with determination. "Grace, I heard the news." Grace dropped the letters, wrapping her arms around her friend, grateful for the grounding force. "It's all gone, Tamar, everything," she said, her voice cracking. Tamar's expression softened. "Yes, but you're still here. We can rebuild." Grace nodded, sensing the flicker of hope reignite. Together, they began to dig through the remnants, sifting through the remains not only for material possessions but for the spirit of what once was. With each item they uncovered, a child's drawing, a rusty toy truck, the memories flooded back, painting the air with laughter amidst the wreckage. As dusk began to settle over the valley, the shadows lengthened across the land, but Grace felt a growing warmth within her. She turned to Tamar, ideas already forming. Tamar asked, brushing soot from her hands. "I mean, this can be more than just a home. It can be a symbol." Tamar's eyes lit up. "Yes." They stood together under the vast, starry sky, dreaming of a new vision. This would be their chance to construct not just walls, but a legacy that stood far beyond the ruins, a vibrant hub for family and friends, for laughter and love. Days turned into weeks, and the local community rallied with remarkable support. Friends and strangers alike showed up, armed with tools and a determination to help Grace rebuild. Together, they cleared the land, layer by layer, creating space not only for a new home but for new possibilities. As the walls began to rise, Grace felt lighter, the burden of despair transforming into an uplifting spirit. They painted, hammered, and created. The ranch began to morph into a lively space filled with laughter and shared labor. The children ran around, their giggles breaking through the heavy silence that had once enveloped the area. Every stroke of paint, every nail driven in brought forth warmth, the kind that had been missing since the fire. Yet, even amidst this transformation, moments of grief still struck. Late at night, Grace would wander through empty rooms, overwhelmed by the memories that echoed through the walls. She would catch herself reaching for her husband's hand, yearning for his familiar presence. In those quiet moments, she allowed herself to grieve. She realized that hardship and healing could coexist, side by side. Emotions crashed over her like waves, but amid the storm, she discovered that by embracing her pain, she could also embrace joy. One breezy afternoon, while planting flowers in the garden, Grace felt the gentle sun on her skin. Jack and Maria danced around her, laughter spilling into the air. "Mom!" Jack shouted, racing towards her with a handful of wildflowers. Grace knelt to meet them, her heart swelling at their joy. The flowers, though small and wild, were the finest treasures she could imagine. "Let's plant them together," Grace said, smiling wide. And as the children helped her dig in the soft earth, she felt something shift within. This garden, with its vibrant colors and resilience, began to symbolize new beginnings. Within the blooms lay memories, stitched together from the past and blossoming with hope for the future. They had lost so much, yet here they were creating something extraordinary, a reminder that even from ashes, life could thrive. Months later, the new ranch was nearly complete, and with it came a sense of accomplishment. One night, as the stars twinkled brightly overhead, Grace stood on the porch, gazing at the transformation behind her. The home was no longer just a structure. It represented a journey through pain and loss, of rebuilding and rediscovering. As neighbors gathered for the housewarming, they filled the space with joy, laughter, and warmth. Grace watched her children chase after each other, their faces alight with happiness, and knew that this moment was everything she had fought for. Surrounded by love, she felt empowered and steady, urging her forward as they shared food and laughter. During the gathering, she stepped back outside to catch her breath and watch the night sky. The soft breeze brushed against her, and as she stood there, she felt an undeniable connection to her past, not in sorrow but in gratitude. "I did this," she whispered to herself. With tears glistening in her eyes, Grace turned, looking back at the laughter spilling from within her new home. The ranch was alive once more, each room, each sound a testament to resilience. They had turned pain into purpose, heartbreak into hope. Days rolled into weeks, and with every change, Grace found her footing more confident. It wasn't just about rebuilding a house. It was about reconstructing a life filled with purpose. She finally found her calling, becoming a community advocate for fire recovery, using her journey to help others regain their dignity amidst loss. The days were long, but she welcomed the challenge. The ranch transformed into a space of learning summer camps for kids, gardening workshops for families, a safe haven where laughter echoed and stories flowed. Gradually, it became a sanctuary where hearts healed and dreams blossomed amidst the very echoes of loss. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Grace gathered her children and their friends in the garden. "Tonight," she began, her voice steady, "we're going to plant a tree." The children cheered, excitement bubbling over as they dug a hole in the soft earth together. One by one, they took turns placing the sapling into the ground, the roots intertwining with the memories of resilience. As they covered it with dirt, Grace felt a profound sense of peace settle in her heart. They may have lost a home, but they had created something that would endure for generations, a legacy woven from love, laughter, and the sheer will to rise again. And as Grace stood there, surrounded by life, she knew there would be storms ahead. But when they came, she would face them head-on. She would no longer be just a rancher. She would be a force of nature, grounded in hope and empowered by the strength of community. In that moment, beneath the stars and the branches of a newly planted tree, she found the essence of what it meant to truly live. From the ashes of her past, a brighter future had emerged. She was not just surviving, she was thriving with her heart wide open, ready for whatever lay ahead. The sun hung low in the sky, casting an orange glow over the blackened remains of what was once Grace's home. Charred wood, twisted metal, and a suffocating silence filled the space where laughter and love had thrived. Days had passed since the fire consumed everything, and yet the air still smelled of smoke and despair. Grace stood amidst the ashes, her heart heavy with a mixture of grief and disbelief. It seemed impossible that everything she had built over the years could vanish in a matter of moments. Memories flooded back, the sound of her children's laughter, the smell of dinner cooking in the kitchen. They felt distant now, like whispers carried away by a breeze. But in that moment, a strange sense of determination ignited within her. It was as if something deep inside refused to let this be the end. She knelt down, hands trembling, and began to dig through the debris. She had to uncover anything, that could help her understand the journey she had just faced. The ash was hot and gritty beneath her fingers, each scoop unearthing pieces of her life. As she dug deeper, she unearthed a twisted piece of metal, exposing the remnants of an old photo frame. It was shattered, but Grace recognized it immediately. The picture of their family trip to the coast, smiles bright and carefree. In that moment, her heart twisted painfully. It was a reminder of happier days, yet it sparked something deeper. "I will not let this destroy me," she whispered under her breath, feeling the determination swell. The grief was still there, heavy as lead, but that lead also felt like a fortress forming resolve within her. She thought of her children, Jack and Maria, how they had looked up at her with wide eyes, hearts full of trust. The fire had taken their home, but it wouldn't take their spirit. Grace continued to unearth memories as she dug. A scorched stuffed animal, remnants of a book with the spine cracked. Each piece told a story, fragments of joy juxtaposed against the sorrow. She felt a connection to each relic, a pulse of life lingering in what had been, urging her to keep going. Hours passed, the sun dipping lower as shadows stretched longer over the landscape. As the chill of the evening began to creep in, Grace unearthed something hard, a small metal box buried beneath layers of ash. Her heart raced as she pulled it free. It was charred and beaten but still intact. She held it in her hands, contemplating its significance. Steeling herself, Grace opened the box. Inside were letters tied together with a faded piece of ribbon. As she gingerly unfolded the first one, the delicate scrawl of her late husband flowed onto the page. "My dearest Grace, every moment with you is a treasure." Tears prickled at her eyes, but this time they were different. They were not just tears of sadness, they were tears of connection. The letters were a lifeline, a window into the love they had shared. Her husband's spirit seemed to flow through those words, reminding her that life was not just about what was lost, but also what was cherished. With renewed vigor, Grace read on, inhaling the inked sentiments that leaped off the page. Each line sparked a warmth within her, igniting memories that felt like a burning ember in her heart. She suddenly felt less alone. Her fingers trembled as she put down the letter, trying to compose herself. That's when she heard a familiar voice. Tamara, her best friend, rushed towards her, concern etched on her face. "I came as soon as I heard." Grace turned, pulling her friend into an embrace, her body shaking with emotion. "It's all gone, Tamara." Tamara pulled back, looking into her eyes. "No, not everything. You're still here." Grace nodded, taking a deep breath. For the first time since the fire, she felt something shift within her. Hope. Together they began to sift through the ashes. As they dug, they shared stories and laughter, memories rising from the depths like forgotten songs. Tamara's presence was grounding, a reminder that she wasn't alone in this struggle. They uncovered toys, photos, and keepsakes, a patchwork of the life Grace had built. It was painful, yet exhilarating, a mix of sorrow and celebration. They took moments to honor each piece they found, breathing life back into fading memories. As night settled in, the stars flickered above, a stark contrast to the darkened land below. Grace looked around, the weight of what they'd lost mingling with the hope of what could be. "We can't just rebuild a house," she said suddenly, realization washing over her. Tamara's eyes lit up. "Yes, a place where kids can play, where families can come together." The seeds of a new vision took root between them, a powerful ambition to make this tragedy a catalyst for something greater. They would create a sanctuary from the ashes, where laughter replaced despair. Time flew by as they gathered community support. Neighbors began to arrive, tools in hand and creativity in their hearts. It transformed into a collective effort. Everyone pitched in, each person dedicated to helping Grace rebuild not just a house, but a home alive with possibility. As the ranch took shape, Grace felt the shadows of her grief transform into something lighter. There was laughter as friends painted walls and shared meals. The air filled with the warm glow of camaraderie, healing amidst the labor. Jack and Maria helped too, amazed at how friends came together to forge a new beginning. But as the days turned to weeks, moments of sadness would still wash over her. With every hammer strike echoing throughout the day, memories flickered, comforting yet haunting. Some nights Grace would sit in the quiet spaces of the half-built house, feeling the presence of her husband. His absence lingered like an echo, a reminder that loss and love could intertwine. She learned to embrace that ache, letting it coexist with her laughter. It reminded her of the depth of their bond and the love that had built their life together. One sunny morning, as she worked in the garden with the children, they stumbled upon a patch of wildflowers pushing through the ground. Jack's eyes widened. "Look, Mom." Grace knelt next to the flowers, brushing her fingers over the delicate petals. "Just like us," she said softly. Those flowers became a symbol, a testament to resilience. They would be part of the new garden, intertwined with their stories, a representation of what it meant to rise again. As weeks turned into months, the community hub emerged. Bright walls, laughter-filled spaces, and a garden full of life. It became a safe haven, drawing the neighborhood together, celebrating laughter and companionship. Grace organized events for families, picnics, educational workshops, and community gatherings. One clear evening, as the sun set against a backdrop of vibrant colors, Grace gathered neighbors around a long table set under the stars. She could hardly believe the transformation. This place that once stood empty now overflowed with warmth and connection. "Tonight isn't just about coming together," Grace addressed everyone, her voice steady. It's about celebrating resilience and the bond that unites us all. As hands reached for food and laughter rang out, she felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. Life had dealt her a devastating hand, but she had learned to play it well. And as the stars twinkled above, she spotted a single bright one. In that moment, she whispered a silent thank you to her husband. He had guided her here, helped her harness her strength. Months later, as the seasons changed, Grace stood in the garden, the vibrant flowers blooming around her. Jack and Maria were running happily, their laughter weaving through the air like music. She had created not merely a place to live, but a vibrant community woven from the fabric of grief, resilience, and love. One evening, she gathered both kids and told them about the wildflowers. "Remember these, they survived just like us." Tears coalesced in her eyes, but this time they were filled with joy. The echo of their family's laughter had returned, melding perfectly with the spirit of those gone. Grace felt love flowing through the land, a promise that life would thrive. Standing under the stars at the center of the vibrant community they had built, she understood something profound. The fire had taken much, but it had also given them an opportunity, a chance to create love from ashes, to lift others up amid their struggles. In the depths of loss, she had found clarity, purpose, and a renewed spirit. Through the pain, she had unearthed not just remnants of her past, but the promise of a future filled with hope. As she looked around at the flowers, the laughter of children, the warmth in the air, Grace smiled. She was no longer just a rancher. She was a warrior battle-tested and strong, thriving in the garden of her new life. Her heart was full, and she knew the truth. Even in the darkest nights, the dawn would always follow, bringing hope and possibility with every breaking day. The sun began to set, casting a soft orange glow over the remnants of what used to be her home. Grace stood on the edge of the charred landscape, heart pounding in her chest. Just days ago, laughter echoed through the rooms, children darting around, their eyes sparkling with joy. Now there was nothing but silence, the air heavy with the smell of smoke and loss. Grace couldn't comprehend how everything could vanish so quickly, consumed by the fierce blaze that had swept through her land. It had been a normal day, her son chasing after the family dog, her daughter helping her in the garden. And then came the fire, fierce and unforgiving, roaring like a vengeful beast. The flames had engulfed everything before she even had a chance to react. But standing there amidst the ashes, a fierce determination sparked inside her, igniting a flame of its own. She had to dig. She had to uncover something, anything, that could bridge the gap between the life she'd lost and the future that lay ahead. Without hesitation, Grace dropped to her knees, hands shaking with adrenaline and sorrow. The soot felt gritty and hot against her skin as she began to sift through the debris, each handful a reminder of the life that once was. Each piece was layered with memory, like the many stories woven into the fabric of their lives. With every scoop, she uncovered fragments of her family's history, a cracked plate, the tattered corner of a beloved children's book, remnants of toys long forgotten. But then her fingers brushed against something cool and solid, a stark contrast to the ash that surrounded it. Grace paused, heart racing. She pulled back the layers of soot, revealing a small metal object. As she brushed away the remnants, she gasped. The discovery was an antique locket, its silver surface tarnished but familiar. With trembling hands, she opened it, revealing photographs of her children, Jack and Maria, frozen in moments of sheer delight. Tears welled in her eyes. "You're still here," she whispered, feeling the warmth of their smiles flood back into her heart. The fire had taken so much, but here was a piece of them, a small spark of hope amidst the despair. With renewed focus, she pushed deeper into the ashes. But even as she dug, fear crept in. What if there was nothing left? What if the memories she sought were lost forever? The uncertainty weighed heavily on her, like a dark cloud looming overhead. Yet within that cloud, she felt a flicker of strength, a reminder that she had fought battles before. Her hands continued to work, sifting faster now. It was a rhythmic motion, like a soldier on a mission, driven by purpose. The weight of grief was still there, a heavy cloak upon her shoulders, but the determination lifted her higher. She envisioned what could be, the new memories waiting to be made. Time slipped away, the sun dipping lower, bathing the sky in hues of purple and pink. Suddenly, Grace unearthed something solid and unexpected. It was a small, weathered journal, singed at the edges but mostly intact. With a quick glance to the horizon, she opened it, breathless. The handwriting was familiar, graceful, and fluid. Her husband's words came to life on the pages. Warmth flooded her chest as she read his words, each sentence ringing with love and memories of better times. The tears she had fought back fell freely now, a gentle rain of sorrow and joy. He had poured his heart into those pages, and in doing so had breathed life back into her own heart. As she continued to read, the world around her faded. This journal held their journey together, the dreams, the challenges, the laughter and tears. It was a reminder that even in the darkest days, love could endure. Then she heard footsteps, crunching on the scattered debris. Tamara shouted, rushing over. Her best friend's voice was a lifeline. Grace looked up, her expression a mixture of relief and exhaustion. "It's all gone, Tamara." Her voice trailed off, heavy with unspoken grief. Tamara knelt beside her, concern filling her features. "No, not everything. You're still here. We can rebuild this." Grace grasped the journal tightly and felt the tears returning. "I found some things," she said, holding up the locket and the journal. "But this is just." Tamara's eyes softened. "I can only imagine, but you're not alone in this." The two of them began to sift through the wreckage, the heat of the day now tempered by the warmth of friendship. As they worked, laughter and stories began to flow, memories weaving through the air like a comforting thread. Each discovery became a shared experience, every burnt toy and faded photograph sparking a story, bringing laughter amidst the pain. As dusk settled in, bathing the world in shades of twilight, Grace felt a transformation within herself. The landscape was still charred and broken, but the laughter shared with Tamara was like a balm. Together, they were turning the ash into something beautiful, reclaiming memories instead of succumbing to grief. Gradually, they unearthed more treasures, old recipes scribbled on torn paper, a small hand-painted rock that Jack had made when he was just a toddler. Each piece was a connection to the love they had built. As the night deepened, they collected the items, creating a small pile of memories that, despite the fire, still bore witness to their family's life. In that moment, surrounded by the fragments of what had been, Grace felt the stirrings of hope begin to rise from the ashes. She said suddenly, her voice stronger now, "What if we create something more, a community space?" Tamara's eyes sparkled. "Yes." The two women shared a look, the charge of possibility buzzing in the air between them. They could not only restore a broken home, but also create a sanctuary, a new beginning woven from the fragments they'd unearthed. Weeks turned into months as the community rallied around Grace. Neighbors flocked in with tools and a sense of purpose. The ranch became a hive of activity, laughter filling the air as people worked side by side. They painted walls, planted gardens, and rebuilt not just a physical structure, but a stronghold of hope. Yet, even amidst the flurry of activity, moments of sorrow arrived unbidden. In the soft glow of twilight, Grace would sit quietly, remembering her husband, the way he would comfort her, the promises he made of better days ahead. Those echoes of love lingered in the corners of her heart, but instead of allowing sorrow to consume her, she learned to embrace it as a part of her journey. It was a reminder of the strength he had instilled in her. Each memory brought clarity, empowering her to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As new walls rose, a garden flourished. Grace watched as children ran free among the blossoms, laughter bubbling up like the melody of life. They had transformed the broken pieces into beauty, stitching memories into the fabric of their new home. One sunny afternoon, Grace gathered Jack and Maria in the garden, the colors vibrant and alive around them. "Today we're planting a tree," she announced, digging into the earth with renewed vigor. The children beamed with excitement, helping her dig a hole deep enough for the roots. As they placed the sapling in the earth, Grace marveled at the sheer strength of the moment, a tree planted amidst the ashes, vibrant life aspiring to rise again. Months rolled by, the seasons changing, and yet the spirit of that day remained alive. The tree began to grow, its branches stretching toward the sky as if reaching for the star that had once guided them. Every visit to the garden was a reminder that life continued to bloom even in the face of loss. One night, as Grace sat on the porch looking at the stars, she felt her husband's presence beside her. It was a gentle whisper, a soft assurance that he was still a part of their journey. "You're doing this," she could almost hear him say. She turned to the garden, the laughter of her children echoing in the stillness. This place had transformed her grief into something radiant and alive. It had become a sanctuary, a symbol of resilience and a testament to love. The community hub thrived. Families filled the space with joy, children laughed, and the spirit of togetherness flourished. Grace organized events, laughter ringing through the air like a sweet song, binding everyone closer. They had created not just a building but a legacy, a gathering place where stories would unfold and love would flourish. One bright day, a year after the fire, Grace stood at the center of the community garden surrounded by families, friends, and laughter. She looked at the children running free and felt something wash over her, a profound sense of gratitude. "Thank you for being with us on this journey," she called out, her voice full of emotion. Cheers erupted, laughter mingling with the joy filling the air. As people shared their stories, Grace felt a deep connection to her community. The fire had taken away their old life, but it had also opened the door to something much brighter. As dusk fell, she gathered everyone around the newly planted tree. "This tree represents our journey, the power of love, the strength we found together." Hands reached out, a collective spirit rising. They stood there under the sky, the stars twinkling brightly, each one a beacon of hope. Grace felt the energy pulse around her, and in that moment she knew they had not only rebuilt their home but had created something much more profound, a symbol of resilience and love that would echo through generations. Grace smiled, realizing that her journey was ongoing. She had carved out a new path, transformed her grief into strength, and turned her loss into a legacy of love. The future stretched before her, vibrant as the blooms in her garden, and she was ready to embrace it all. With her children by her side, her community surrounding her, and her heart wide open, Grace stood tall, rooted in the present while honoring her past. From the ashes, life had not only returned, it had thrived, and she was determined to see it flourish every single day. The flames roared like a living beast, devouring everything in their path. Grace stood frozen outside her home, watching the fire consume her life. It felt surreal, a hallucination she couldn't escape. Just hours ago, her children had been running through the living room, laughter spilling into every corner while she prepared dinner, the comforting smell of spices filling the air. Now, the only sounds were the crackle of burning wood and the distant wail of sirens. A deep pang gripped her heart. Everything she cherished, every piece of her family history, was being turned to ash. How could they rebuild from this? What could she possibly do in the wake of such devastation? As if summoned by her despair, an instinct kicked in. She had to dig. Something within her screamed that there had to be something left, something worth uncovering. She dropped to her knees, her hands digging into the hot ash, each handful bringing back memories of warmth and love tightly interwoven with the grief that threatened to swallow her whole. Her hands trembled as she began to sift through the remnants of what was once her life. Every scoop was an echo of laughter that resounded in her mind. The kitchen, where so many meals had been shared, the living room filled with the energy of family game nights. She clawed through the debris, desperate to find anything that could tether her to those joyful times. Suddenly, her fingers brushed against something solid, a rough edge peeking out from the charred ruins. Heart racing, she cleared the ash away, revealing a small box, scorched but still intact. Grace's breath caught in her throat. With careful urgency, she pulled it free, holding it in her trembling hands. Through the grime, she could see it was engraved, a treasure box of sorts. She opened it, her heartbeat echoing in her ears. Inside lay a collection of old letters tied with a faded ribbon. "Dear Grace," one letter began, the handwriting distinctly her husband's, a script she had cherished for years. Tears pooled in her eyes as she read. Each word was like a heartbeat from the past, vibrating with love and warmth. His handwritten notes had filled her heart with emotion, and now they were a lifeline, pulling her back to the everyday joys amidst the horror. Wiping tears from her face, Grace clutched the letters tightly, feeling her strength surge. "You're still with me," she whispered to the ashes. But as the dust settled and the sun sank lower on the horizon, an unsettling thought crept into her mind. What would rebuilding look like? She glanced around at the destruction, her heart growing heavier. She mumbled aloud. That's when she heard footsteps approaching. It was Tamar, her best friend, rushing toward her, the concern etched deep in her features. "I heard about the fire." Grace's heart swelled to see Tamar. "I'm here," she said, pulling her friend into an embrace. "But it's all gone, everything. We'll figure this out together," Tamar assured her, her voice like a warm blanket wrapping around Grace's trembling heart. With renewed determination, the two women began to sift through the ruins. Each object they discovered became a piece of their shared history, a fragment of Grace's life. A photo here, a toy there, each item wrapped in stories, laughter, and tears. As the shadows grew long and the sun dipped below the horizon, the fire's destruction seemed less daunting. They were turning sorrow into something tangible, transforming grief into resilience. "Look at all we found," Tamar said, holding up a bent toy truck. Grace nodded, feeling comfort in the shared experience. "You're right, this place can still have life, Tamar." As night fell, the two women sat amid the debris, illuminated by the soft glow of their flashlights. Each moment was filled with a renewed sense of purpose. The specter of grief still loomed, but it began to take on a different shape, a coiled string. Days turned into weeks, and the community rallied around Grace. Neighbors she had scarcely interacted with before now showed up with tools, meals, and hearts warmed by compassion. The ranch transformed from a site of loss into a hub of hope and support. With each nail hammered and beam raised, Grace could almost feel her husband beside her, whispering words of encouragement. The sorrow evolved, intertwining with the laughter of her children as they decorated the new space, colors vibrant and cheerful, filling the air with life. One day, while the children played outside, Grace took a moment to breathe in the cool air, feeling the warmth of sun on her skin. She leaned against a newly built fence and closed her eyes. "I can do this," she whispered to herself, embracing the sheer force of her determination. But even as she pushed forward, haunting moments of grief surfaced. Shadows would sneak up on her, wrapping around her heart unexpectedly. Late nights spent alone, she'd find herself slipping into memories. The sweet smell of her husband's cologne, the sound of his laughter ringing through their home. In those quiet times, she felt the weight of his absence bearing down on her like a thick fog. And then, on one such night with the stars shining bright overhead, she was suddenly struck with clarity. "I'm not just rebuilding a home," she realized aloud. Weeks turned into months, and by the time the first anniversary of the fire approached, the community hub was nearly complete. It stood strong, not just as a building, but as a powerful testament to resilience, each layer brick and mortar binding heartstrings together. Grace organized the opening ceremony for the center, filling it with warmth, laughter, and the promise of new beginnings. The day arrived, and she stood at the entrance with her children, heart pounding in her chest. As people began to gather, the air felt electric with energy. Neighbors and friends came, smiling and laughing, drawn together by the love they all had for one another. Grace felt a swell of pride as she watched her children greet their friends and chatter excitedly. Then the clouds overhead began to gather, a dark blanket pressing down. A storm was brewing. She could feel the tension in the air, but she brushed it aside. This was a day of celebration, a day of life. With a deep breath, she took center stage and spoke. "Thank you all for being here today, for supporting me and my children through this journey." As cheers erupted, the skies above cracked open. Rain poured down, heavy and unyielding. People laughed, dancing in the downpour, turning the storm into a celebration. Grace spun with Jack and Maria, joy spiraling through her heart as the raindrops fell like glittering diamonds. But as the moment unfolded, she felt an unusual heaviness in the air, an unsettling chill that sank into her bones. Something wasn't right. The rain poured harder, almost in a frenzy, and a sudden gust of wind yanked at the banners they had hung to celebrate the day. For a split second, it felt like the world had shifted around them. The laughter faded, replaced by a low rumble in the distance like thunder or a storm brewing deep within the earth. Grace's heart raced, adrenaline surging through her as she turned to the horizon. Just when she thought the rain would calm, it intensified, rolling like a wave across the open fields. Panic rippled through the crowd as people began to scatter, seeking shelter. Then, out of the corner of her eye, she spotted something dark and ominous gathering on the horizon, swirling with a ferocity that filled her with dread. It looked like a wall of blackness sweeping toward them, like the wrath of nature itself descending. "Grace!" Tamara shouted, pulling her to the side, but her gaze was fixed on that darkness, heart racing. She managed to say, her voice barely a whisper. Tamara looked back, terror etching her features. "I don't know." Suddenly, a lightning bolt cracked across the sky, and all at once chaos erupted. People were running, screaming. Grace grabbed her children, fear gripping her heart. She held them tightly, looking back at the swirling mass. And then, with a deafening roar, the storm hit with violent force, tearing through the gathering as the ground trembled beneath their feet. As they stumbled toward safety, Grace felt an overwhelming sense of dread rushing through her. Just as she reached the door of the community center, she looked back one last time. In that terrifying moment, she realized that the storm wasn't just a tempest of rain and wind. It was the reflection of the chaos within the upheaval of her life, the constant struggle between loss and hope, all swirling around her, raw and untamed. The future felt uncertain, dark clouds looming over everything she had strived to rebuild. Would she lose it all again, or could she turn this chaos into something new? With that thought, Grace took a deep breath, a feeling of determination racing through her veins. No matter what this storm would bring, she was ready to face it head-on, for herself, for her children, and for the legacy of love that would never burn away, no matter how fierce the flames or how dark the shadows. And in that moment, as the storm crashed against the walls of their new sanctuary, Grace understood that the greatest storms often came before the dawn, and she was ready to embrace every challenge that lay ahead.